Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Obviously I like miniatures. I am a sucker for great miniature designs and I really enjoy painting. That's not to say I discount games that don't use miniatures. I love Legends of Andor and Arkham Horror, which use standees, and Jurassic Park Danger and Lords of Waterdeep, which use wooden meeples, to name just a few examples. But miniatures do tend to draw my eye. However, time is finite, so when it comes to painting, I do have to pick and choose my battles with care, prioritising my favourite games or games that use metal miniatures. I can cope with unpainted plastic miniatures, but unpainted metal miniatures is a big no-no. Often, games that come with miniatures in different coloured plastics also have to wait a while to get painted. A game like Space Crusade with its colour-coded characters and villains still looks great on the tabletop without a lick of paint, especially when compared to something like Hybrid or Shadows of Brimstone. Although, that being said, Space Crusade is definitely getting painted as soon as I wrap my latest campaign playthrough. And of course, sometimes games come with pre-painted or pre-coloured miniatures. What a treat. This is something that seems to be happening less and less these days. The costs involved in pre-painted miniatures is high, and that translates into big ticket prices on the final product. For example, Dungeons & Dragons Onslaught is well over £100 in the UK and contains just 21 painted miniatures. The Frogmire Coven expansion is over £75 and contains just 7 pre-painted miniatures plus another 6 painted pieces to make up the boss miniature. It's quite expensive for a relatively straightforward skirmish game that, by some accounts, doesn't have the highest production quality. So I don't have a lot of games with pre-painted miniatures in my collection, but I have a few, so I thought we could take a quick look at some of the best. Do note, while I will briefly talk about the games these miniatures come from, in most cases I have already talked about these games in some depth, so the focus here is the miniatures. I will put links in the video description to deeper discussion of the games themselves where possible. The first game we are going to look at has miniatures that barely pass as pre-painted, but nonetheless they do have a nice finish and they are part of a game that has become one of my favourite 2-player skirmish games ever, Unmatched. Unmatched is a wonderful card-driven combat game where names from legend and literature face each other in small arenas for no other reason than to see what will happen. Each box set in the range is a standalone game, either for 2 players for a small box or 2 to 4 players for a large box, and they are all cross-compatible, allowing you to create fantastical matchups. I have the Cobble and Fog set and the Robin Hood vs Bigfoot set, both of which have themes I really enjoy. The miniatures are lovely, and they come in grey with a simple wash to make the details pop. I know a lot of people repaint them, giving them a full colour makeover, but I do like their simple elegance, and it gives the pieces just enough detail and character for me to comfortably and happily exclude them from my ever-growing painting queue. The miniatures you see here are all from Cobble and Fog: Dracula, the Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll and Sherlock Holmes, some of my favourite literary characters. They are on 25mm bases, and from base to eye height they are around 34 to 36mm. In my collection of games I also have the precursor to Unmatched, Transformers Armada, a reskinning and simplification of the game's Star Wars epic duels. It uses pretty much the same card-driven combat system as Unmatched, but it's much more straightforward, and combat occurs on a more traditional gridded battlefield compared to the area-based arenas of Unmatched. Armada's big selling point is the inclusion of 8 pre-painted Transformers. For the Autobots you get Hotshot, Smokescreen, Red Alert and Optimus Prime. For the Decepticons you get Starscream, Cyclonus, Demolisher and Megatron. They are not painted particularly well, but I think they look great. My favourite is Optimus, but Cyclonus is also top notch. They are on bases that are roughly 30mm diameter, and Megatron stands the tallest at around 72mm from tabletop to the tip of his treads. Sticking to the skirmish game theme, next up we have FunkoVerse. Much like Unmatched, this is a game that lets you mix and match characters to see how they would fare in a dust-up. However, unlike Unmatched, the characters in the FunkoVerse are all from popular culture and the combat is dice-based. The game is relatively simple, aimed at a younger audience I would say, but it has a really fun system where you have access to a limited pool of energy and you use that energy to activate character abilities. After a certain amount of time, you get that energy back and you can use it again. Finding a balance between using powerful abilities that tie up energy for longer and weaker abilities that don't is a lot of fun, and when you have several characters on your team, it's really interesting to plot where and when you will use your specific energy types. I have 3 FunkoVerse sets: Nightmare Before Christmas, Game of Thrones and Duels. The pieces are all in the classic Funko Pop style, which admittedly will turn off a lot of people, but they are beautifully designed and coloured, and Funko fans and younger players should get a real kick out of the cuteness. Do note, the pieces are smaller than a regular Funko Pop, but they are still really big for board game pieces. They stand on 38mm interchangeable bases, and they are around 70mm from tabletop to the top of their bulbous heads. I have noticed that FunkoVerse sets often turn up cheap. I paid £3 for Duels, and the Game of Thrones set was £10. I think they are well worth grabbing when you see them at those sorts of prices. Sticking with Funko but moving away from skirmish games now, we have Five Nights at Freddy's Night of Frights game. This is a surprisingly fun little game aimed at a younger crowd. I have had some great times playing this with my children, ages 13 and 6. You play as one of the Five Nights animatronics, and the intention is to collect sets of tokens, using them to power up your scare meter, and then you spook the security guard. The first player to spook him wins. It's very simple but plays quickly, and there is enough going on for it to stay engaging. It also has a lovely presentation. The game comes in a pizza box, and many of the components are themed to look like they came from a fast food joint. And of course, you get 4 really nice coloured playing pieces. These pieces are small but brilliantly done, and they add a lot to the table presence of the game, which is already very bright and colourful. My favourite is Freddy himself. The tallest is Bonnie the Bunny, standing at approximately 45mm to the tip of her ear. Do note, these miniatures do not have bases, they just have big feet. Next we move on to something completely different, Mage Knight. For a very long time I have rated this as one of my favourite games, but in all honesty it doesn't see a lot of table time these days. It's such a big time consuming game, I find it takes quite a lot of mental energy for me to go through the process of setting it all up. Additionally, I have only ever played the game solo. I wouldn't even know where to begin trying to teach the game to a group. But when the game does hit the table and I have the time to immerse myself in the experience, I always have a good time. This is actually a game I don't think I've ever talked about on the channel, at least not in any kind of real depth. I should do so at some point because it really is a very clever game. It's one of those overland adventure games where you reveal sections of the map. The idea is to interact with towns, villages, monasteries and other important locations to raise an army and improve your skills so you are strong enough to take down entire cities. It's card driven and there is a little bit of deck building worked into the core gameplay as you gradually remove weaker cards and take more advanced skills and spells in their place. You will also pick up wounds that will clog up your deck and make you less efficient. What really makes the game stand out is how intricate and real the world feels. If you go to a monastery you can train, or you can decide to sack the place, but if you do, your allies won't help you and your reputation goes down. And if you want to explore a dungeon, you can, but don't expect your army to follow you down there. Armies are for the battlefield, not cramped corridors. And there are countless other little details that make you feel like this is a world that has real laws and reacts to your interactions in a very real way, despite the very puzzly nature of the gameplay. There really is too much to go into here, so let's focus on the point of this video, the miniatures. The core game came with 8 pre-painted pieces, 4 castles, which barely count as pre-painted as they just have roofs that are different colours, and then you have the 4 playable characters. Each character is on a 25mm base and stands around 32 to 34mm tall from the top of their bases to eye height. I also have 2 of the expansions, so I have 2 extra heroes, one of which is an Orc Shaman that looks completely different to how everything else is painted, and then there is the big bad villain General Volker, who is on a clicky base and stands around 40mm tall from top of base to eye height. The final game to look at is something collectible, the long out of production Lord of the Rings tradable miniatures game from Sabertooth Games. For some reason, back before I had kids, before I was even married, I thought it would be fun to collect a set of pre-painted miniatures. I managed to get all of the base set and all of the second wave miniatures, and then I gave up, shortly before the game went pop. The game itself is a fun hex-based skirmish or war game with some similarities to HeroClix. Each character has 2 trackers on their base, one for health and one for energy that they can use to activate their abilities. You and your opponent build a force based on points, and then you go at it, either in a match battle or a scenario. Maybe I will do a playthrough on the channel one day, but for now we will just look at a selection of the miniatures. These are traditional pre-paints, and as such the quality varies considerably from miniature to miniature. However, for the most part I would say the quality is pretty decent, and generally better than the paint quality on the modern pre-painted D&D minis. All of these miniatures are made out of a very soft plastic, so many of mine are bent as they have been in storage for a long time, but some hot water will straighten them out easily. While a lot of the miniatures are posed to match the miniatures from the Lord of the Rings game from Games Workshop, Sabertooth was a subsidiary company of theirs at the time, the scale is very different. These miniatures are on hex bases that measure 45mm point to point, and they are around 36 to 38mm from top of the base to eye height. There are also larger figures like the glorious cave troll and the big bad Sauron himself, which cover 4 hexes, and then there are even bigger models like the fell beasts and Balrog. Some really good looking pieces that give the game an amazing table presence. And I think that will about do it. If any of these games look interesting to you, check the video description below. I will be placing links there if I have full reviews or deep dives into their rules. Otherwise, that is it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.